Welcome, everyone, to the Cyber Physics Podcast, where we unravel the complex web of cybersecurity through the lens of its foundational principles. I'm your host, and today, we embark on an intellectual journey that mirrors the intricacy of physics itself. Joining us are two remarkable experts, Ranghan Venkatraman and Eric Adams, as we delve into cyber physics in essence.
So very good to meet you, Eric. And let's start with what do you actually do? What is your role in the company?
So I am a CISO advisor and FedRAMP Authority to Operate specialist with the FedRAMP.gov program for third-party private cloud service providers.
So your role is to be a CISO advisor to those third-party cloud providers, right?
That is correct. Third-party cloud systems that are doing work on behalf of government.
Oh, that's really cool. So very nice to hear that. A bit about myself. I'm Ranghan. I'm the CEO and the CTO of Pinnacle. It is a subsidiary of Resilience, and Pinnacle was sort of born like a shark that came out of a fish. We were doing a lot of work in cybersecurity and then spun off a separate company to do that. And we basically focus on solutions, products, as well as platforms, doing it end to end. Love the space. Think highly of what, this opportunity is. From what you're seeing, the current landscape, maybe I'll first ask you if you have a point of view on what you saw at SolarWinds. And if you sort of agree with the line of where SEC is taking it, or do you have a different point of view?
Yeah, sorry, I had a little bit of audio disruption, but I think that you talked about the SEC a little bit and some of the current things that they're doing. And so I think one of the most important things is for companies to, in advance, understand what materiality looks like. So if there is a cyber incident, how they're going to measure that and how they're going to report it and how quickly they can report it back to SEC regulations. And that's working very closely with legal department, of course, accounting departments, CEO level, and of course, cybersecurity and IT teams to understand what that looks like and a plan on being able to do that in advance rather than waiting for an actual event to occur. So I think that's part of cyber risk management, which is super important to rehearse these type of things in addition to things like business continuity, disaster recovery, is to be able to rehearse these type of issues that could come up and know what the plan is going to be and also know how to measure it and how to report it.
No, thank you for that. There's an underlying concern that I have. That is, in a lot of cases, as we know, doing cybersecurity for a living, sometimes it actually takes several days to even know that you have actually had a breach. And it does take a considerable amount of time to actually, align the story. And you could be guilty before you even know that you are, a victim of a breach.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, I think Mandiant's got a lot of good statistics on that, where understanding that most people don't know that there have been or being breached until at least 100 days, could be almost up to a year. And so that's why having the right telemetry and tooling and observability monitoring is super important, but there's still things that may go undetected. And so knowing how to handle those and also being able to qualify something, whether it actually is a breach or if it's a misconfiguration, which didn't lead to access to anything, but that just needs to be fixed, remediated, and understanding and qualifying that process. But then also, once you do know that there's an issue, again, having a game plan, being able to remediate it, contain it, then report it to the people who need to know, according to contracts or legal obligations. That's very important to understand that and to know that as a part of cyber risk management.
The whole concept of an APT, is an important one. And I think, I feel that there's an opportunity for them to really look at it from a different lens, perhaps look at APTs, which may remain in your environment for months or even years before it actually, manifests. You also have scenarios where you have ticking time bombs that can be dropped in your environment and you don't know, and the ticking time bomb may actually explode at a much later point when it is completely unexpected. So those are tricky ones. And I think the third tricky one, of course, is the nature of the phishing and smishing, which is actually going in a much more. Even today, we had quite a few emails that we had identified as issues, and there seems to be new forms of attacks just in those fronts. My question would be that when you have new forms of attacks, which are usually not in the conventional route, because they've emerged, and you can only do so much. Shouldn't someone have a get out of jail card because they've actually implemented all the controls, and despite and in spite you still can get hacked? But shouldn't there be a get out of jail card if you have actually implemented the right types of controls?
That's an interesting question. I kind of have my thoughts on that, and my perspective is that's always going to happen, and it continually happens. And so you do have to do the required things that are needed. That's just a given, and you're going to have to do those. But also, your approach to cyber risk management needs to understand that there's always going to be things that are new and developing, and your methodologies to be able to contain that risk has to adapt to that. So you have to show that you are doing that, and you're able to analyze a few things like, why are people attacking us? Do they think there's something inside, behind the firewall, or in our systems that they want? What are they looking at? What are they trying to pull out? What type of data do they want? And really understand in the attacker's mind what they're doing, and then also understand the trend and the pattern of new and developing attacks, and be able to think about that and think about ways that you can put preventative controls in place, but also be able to develop plans to address any new threats. And there's always going to be new things that happen, and that's where having procedures and personnel that are trained to be able to understand that and to be able to react to it properly, and then to be able to decide what to do, whether that's unplugging all of your systems until you can recover, or whatever it might take to be able to do that. So I think that once you've seen a lot of different things and scenarios, that experience really kind of opens your eyes that there's always going to be new things happening, and you've got to be able to react to them.
No, thanks for that. In your work, with third-party, companies that do, stuff on the cloud, what do you see as some of the key emerging challenges from a cyber perspective that sort of keeps you up at night in terms of where that's headed?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I started into IT and cybersecurity almost 30 years ago, most things were on premise. They were within your company's walls or within your building. And so you would procure software or whatever it was, and you would install it, and vendors would have patches or whatever it was, and you would install those. But now most newer companies, and even existing enterprise customers or companies within business divisions, they're using a lot of third-party cloud software, and they do that because they don't develop and write everything or buy things and install them, because that's not their core competency. They want to focus on their core business, so they rely on these. So one of the challenges is being able to have those vendors meet your own security policies. And so whenever you procure these from third parties, or whenever someone is procuring your cloud service, there's usually a security questionnaire that goes along with their policies. And so the challenge is not all of those are the same or aligned. They might be aligned to something like Cloud Security Alliance or something like that, or ISO 27001. However, you then negotiate and you're able to get the best working solution. And sometimes you might not be able to procure it because it might not meet your security standards, unless there's some sort of agreement that something will be upgraded to meet your standards. And so that's where I've seen a lot of contract negotiation to manage that. But then also ongoing, it's very important to, at least annually, be able to realize and understand that these third parties are still abiding by these procedures. But then even continuously, there is software that's able to monitor third-party risk in real time, and also fourth-party risk, maybe where that third-party cloud system is hosted and other dependencies that they might have. So it becomes a big kind of a web of interdependencies that you should have documented, and you should understand all of those risks, and you should discuss them. And if there are issues and gaps, to be able to understand how you're going to deal with them or have those remediated, have those fixed properly.
I'm going to tie it back to SolarWinds, and there was a posting, and when you analyze the forensics behind it, the the executive or the officer basically said risk accepted and sort of stamped, on that product risk that came with it. Now, cloud providers, I'm sure, have similar challenges. They roll out new, software applications on a regular basis, and when you now have to subscribe to it, what is the legal, way in which this could? I know you're not a legal expert or anything like that, but if you look at liability as a concept, a CISO being now liable, just like a CFO, who is liable for the financial statements. Now you have technology or cybersecurity statements, and then CISOs are suddenly becoming legally liable for something like that. And sometimes the CISO could be cornered by the company, and he or she may have to choose between their job and being honest or truthful. What do you think are the parameters in which these cloud providers can now operate? Because the next new thing is going to be, a cloud provider is going to get sued for a large sum of money. It could even be AWS because, they serve so many, companies, and the odds of something really going wrong is starting to look pretty significant.
It is, and that's changing, and we've seen some of the recent cases where that is evident. And so a lot of actually what I've seen in posts by CISOs is they're kind of freaked out by this. But luckily, what I've seen in experience, again, working closely with chief legal officers and working with legal staff and working with legal people on the legal teams who are risk and compliance experts, that's their part of their title. And whenever you're planning and designing systems and you're understanding customer contracts as well, and legal obligations and things like liability caps in advance, when you're building these and when you're planning these, you should be thinking about those things, because you don't ever want to put yourself in a position where you're not being truthful. You have to be able to say, here's why we did things. Here was the planning. We discussed this as cyber risk management. We discussed this with our legal team, and the legal team has the precedence. You ask the legal team, you say, here are the options. Here's the things we can do. What should we do? And then you put it in place. And that way you're following correct procedures. And that way you can also replay that back to anybody else who asks and show the reason why you did things. But you should never put yourself in a position where you should have to, you would be told to not tell the truth. And if companies are in that position, they need to undo what they've done and fix that, and be able to go through that process and say, okay, internally, we've got some things that are not so great. How do we have cybersecurity technology teams meet with the legal departments, and be able to say, okay, what do we need to do in order to do this correctly? And then the company should be investing a lot of money in fixing that, because they could have legal liabilities. They could have problems. Their C-level people could leave because there are problems. And also it would be a reputational damage to the company if they end up not fixing these things. So these things can be fixed, but they need to be addressed. They can't be ignored. If they're ignored, then they're just a lingering problem that could explode at any time.
Well, thank you for that. Here's my thought, right? I mean, one thing that I can see evolving in the very near future is cybersecurity is not part of the technology division at all. Cybersecurity may end up being part of the risk management function, reporting to the chief risk officer that probably, has legal and cybersecurity all wrapped up in the same axle. And maybe even reporting all the way to the CFO organization because the security function, while has a huge technical component to it, there may be a governance role and or some portion of that moved into the risk function because it just doesn't seem logical for it to be part of the technology function, especially in companies that are governed by the SEC, public companies.
Yeah, exactly. When you're looking at things like separation of duties, that's a prime example. And I've seen organizations where the security departments report into either CTO team or CFO team or legal officer or even CEO. And I think you've described it the best is it should be, and especially with recent developments, I believe it should report into the legal office because there are so many new requirements legally that cybersecurity needs to understand and abide by. And so the more time working with the legal teams, and if you're a part of that department, you're going to be working together more. And so there needs to be more time and effort and money that is put into that, particularly with mapping everything with cybersecurity risk and having a legal lens put on that. And so I think that's super important where if you're in a technology organization, then the pressure is to make sure everything is running and operating and you're able to release software quickly, or you don't want to have anything slowing you down. You don't want to have people telling you no. And so that's understandable because you've got requirements, customer requirements and other requirements, but you can't be put in a position where you're not doing things correctly. And so I think that legal oversight is the best option.
Thanks again. Any other, things you want to perhaps share to the audience based on this discussion as your final words of wisdom as far as this podcast is concerned?
Well, what I've seen is when you're building systems, a lot of times things are built quickly and developed quickly to be able to have a product and to be able to show that and sell it and then get more customers, and then repeat customers, and then of course new prospects. And so there needs to be a time where a company kind of sits back and says, okay, let's really start documenting everything. Let's really look for gaps. Let's look at the industry that we're in and understand some of the risks and look at it from a cyber risk point of view and put that lens on and have others involved in the process. What I've seen to be most successful is having a risk committee where it's a business risk committee where cyber risk is a lot of it, but then there's also general risks, and that this committee has the top level people in the company. And that way there's not people from other organizations or business units wondering, like, what is cybersecurity doing? They're their own silo. We hope they're doing the right thing. And now we're awake at night thinking about these things, hoping there's not a disaster. So when you have a cyber risk committee, you have people that can report from any level in the organization, even in the regular individual contributor roles on up to the top roles. You can have them report what they might see a cyber risk to the cyber risk team. The cyber risk team can analyze it, see if it's a risk to be able to document, and then can bring it up to the risk committee. And then the risk committee can develop treatment plans and understand how to resolve that cyber risk. And so I think that's the best way to do it. And that also includes, like I said, other risks other than just cyber risks. But That way, at least people are on the same page. They understand what they're dealing with, and they have the ability to allocate resources in order to properly take care of those risks.
No, I actually like that. I mean, it's also a good insurance policy for the CISO and for the CIO and the CTO when they actually have a cross-sectional committee. And I think it also makes it a little bit easy for them to actually implement, the changes because you very often have to be a dictator, and there's no democracy that's really doable. And this sort of gives a balance between being a dictator and then creating a democratic framework within the dictatorship model. Because if you put up everything for a vote, you probably will get turned down. And I think this is a great way for everyone to sort of share that risk instead of a single member owning it. It's sort of a cybersecurity jury, for the lack of a better word,
Yeah, exactly. That puts the CISO in a lot better situation, but also you don't have to be a dictator. You can show really, what the issues are and share that with others, because they have their own risks within their own department. So getting on the same page is very important.
Thank you so much, Eric. Look forward to more sessions with you. Much appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
As we wrap up this enlightening episode of the Cyber Physics Podcast, we want to express our deep appreciation to our insightful guests, Ranghan Venkatraman and Eric Adams, for sharing their wisdom with us today. Cyber physics, in essence, has indeed brought us closer to understanding the intricate forces that govern our digital world. We hope you've gained valuable insights and inspiration to navigate the ever-evolving landscape of cybersecurity. Stay connected, stay informed, and remember, the essence of cyber physics is ever present in our connected reality. Until next time, keep exploring and seeking the equilibrium between innovation and safeguarding. Thank you for joining us on this captivating journey.